Do you want, and I'm going to be facetious here, but do you want to go hand wash your laundry or do you want to use a washing machine? It is a machine that has been sort of coded either through software or hardware to do this labor and do this task for you. Do you want a computer to do these tasks for you? It's really a question of what tasks and how much of the task do you want to do.
Rapidly, the professional services world is moving into the Agentic AI era. But are we actually ready for it? Welcome to Clarity on Tech, a podcast powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. I'm Zach Warren, the Institute's Technology and Innovation Insights lead. In each episode, we dive deep into the future of the legal, corporate, tax accounting and audit, and government communities. On today's episode, we discuss Agentic AI in law and professional services at large. What it is, how it's different, and what opportunities it brings. Fresh off of TRI's Emerging Technologies and Generative AI Forum, I speak with Joe Kendall, Director AI Product Management at law firm DLA Piper, who dives into how Agentic AI should be seen as a real opportunity if professionals are willing to take the chance. Hey there, everybody. Zach Warren, Technology and Innovation Insights Lead with the Thomson Reuters Institute, back with another excellent interview for Clarity on Tech. And I'm very excited about this one because it's somebody that I just saw in person about 5 days ago. We were both at the Emerging Technology and Generative AI Forum down in Austin, put on by the Thomson Reuters Institute. And joining me here today is one of the excellent speakers at that event, Joe Kendall, Director AI Product Management at DLA Piper. How are you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing pretty well. As I was saying just a moment ago, catching back up from all of our great conversations and the number of follow-ups coming out of it. It was a fun time at the event.
Absolutely. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as well. So, what we're going to talk a little bit about today is starting off with your panel. Maybe we'll expand out from there, but your panel specifically was on Agentic AI. And I figure it's good just to give a little bit of a baseline because in the past couple years, heard a lot about AI, heard a lot about generative AI. Agentic AI may be a new term for people. So, what's different about Agentic AI from those other terms that we've heard previously?
Right. Well, I'll go really far back. All of 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, AI, when we talked about it, particularly in legal or services context, was around machine learning. And so you would train data and you would build a model, and that was sort of specific for a particular use case. And then ChatGPT blows up. About 3 years ago, we all start saying, "Oh my God, this is magic! This is amazing!" And that became generative AI because for the first time, you could input something and it would generate a response rather than just classify or follow a given pattern. And so we've done a lot with generative AI. And what people are realizing is generative AI is really cool, but what's actually more useful in most workplace contexts, especially in a sort of services or just collaboration environment, is it's not generating something whole cloth. It's actually accomplishing tasks. It's moving through a workflow. It's being able to do something rather than just create something. And so agentic AI is really a bucket of terms that's gotten a whole lot of hype. So everyone has their own little definition, but at the end of the day, it's about having a computer do a task with a set of instructions that you've given it, which, as some of my colleagues, actually my colleagues' kids have pointed out, how is that different from software? And the answer is it is software. Software is doing that, and so there's different ways to use it. But this agentic AI is really about task accomplishment rather than creating something for you.
That is fair. But to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, because you're in a law firm, I work with a lot of people in legal, you probably talk to a lawyer and they say, do I want a machine to be doing these tasks? Do I trust a machine to do these tasks? So, what would be your response to that when a lawyer probably inevitably comes to you?
Everyone, not just lawyers, ask that. And B, the response is really it, it's up to you as to how much you trust it. The answer is machines, which computers, AI, I will refer to them generally as machines because it's human created constructs, can accomplish tasks. Do you want, and I'm going to be facetious here, but do you want to go hand wash your laundry or do you want to use a washing machine? It is a machine that has been sort of coded either through software or hardware to do this labor and do this task for you. Do you want a computer to do these tasks for you? It's really a question of what tasks and how much of the task do you want to do. And so when an attorney comes to me and asks me this, the simple answer is, well, is there grunt work that you do that you wish you didn't have to do? And the answer is always yes. Okay, would you like a machine to do that for you? Sure, but can you trust it to do it? Well, I can trust it to do parts of it. And that's really where the nuance of this new world order comes from, is figuring out how to encode the expertise enough to do that bit and to focus the attorney's attention on the place where they can do the most work, where they can add the most value. Because if you really think about it, even in a billable environment, a large chunk, people may not say this out loud, but not being an attorney, I can say this, a large chunk of your billable time is not the most valuable. It might be a small section of it. It might be 10 or 20% of what you bill is really where you drive that greatest value. And the rest of the time, you're preparing the data or you're drafting something and modifying something you've seen before or other parts from there. And that's where these sort of agentic systems become really useful, is because they can do a lot of the basic work. And so you can focus on the important value add.
One thing I want to touch on as well is just how tough it is to explain in some cases agentic AI. Because I think when you think of legal tech, I know you had an e discovery background and you were able to say, okay, this is an e discovery tool, it's for litigation, this is specifically the use case it's doing. Agentic AI and generative AI a little bit too, it's a little bit tougher to explain because it is so expansive. There are so many potential applications of what this can do. So, to your point, it's a little bit of, okay, well, it can apply here, it can't apply here, picking and choosing where it's best. But that's also not the easiest thing, I think, to explain to people that like to think of technology as black and white.
It is very difficult, and that's a large part of my job, is being able to articulate that. And I think, as some of the other panelists, I think Lynn was calling out, often they're getting pitched for agentic legal solutions. And when they poke at what that means, the response is, I don't actually know. Or, oh, it's a platform, and then you can make it work for you. And in reality, that communication gap is really key, because the where we are in sort of the underlying technology of large language models that power ChatGPT or Gemini or all of this is more like we've created a new material. And I was talking about this before at the event, but it's like we've created steel. And so you're trying to explain everything you can do with steel to someone who just wants to like drive across a bridge. And so that is a big challenge, because a lot of the time these cool demos, it's like, yeah, look, you can make a sword. And it's like, but I don't need a sword. Uh, so one thing that I think is important is, rather than focus on the technology, focus on what the value you're trying to do is. What is the task you're trying to accomplish? And then once people agree on that, you can say, okay, it can do this much of it. And so within DLA, that's a big part of what we're doing. And there are weaknesses to it that I think are also non-intuitive, which we can definitely go into, around how this is the first technology, the first software that we have ever made in any production, non-research sort of environment that doesn't do the same thing every time. It used to be, when you made software, I have a CTO who would hammer this home all the time. When the software is doing what you told it to do, you might not know exactly what you told it to do, but it's doing that, and it does it every time. And for the first time with these like large language models, with these agentic systems, they're probabilistic. They're not deterministic. So they don't do the same thing every time. And that is a feature, not a bug. That's intentional, because that's how you get it to understand these nuances around, oh, I want to do this, because you haven't told it exactly what to do. So it's filling in the gaps. But because they were created to be like humans, they fill in the gaps not the same way every time.
Which is really interesting. Like, that was a phrase that came up often at the conference, was non-deterministic. And I'm curious, the feature, not a bug, as you explain it, I found very, very interesting because even when you think of, say, AI's application to transactional law, that was one of the major pushbacks you saw at the very beginning is I need my contract written the exact same way every time. So I'm going to anticipate that what you'd say is, well, then don't use it for that use case. But I'm curious if diving into a little bit more of the feature, not a bug, why exactly you view it that way.
Well, because how many attorneys can actually rewrite a contract with find and replace? Like, the answer is if you could do that, that's how they would write contracts, and it's not. Because there are nuances, there are little details. The difference, even if it's the exact same phrases, you don't fill out a form and it sticks this form letter into this. You're looking at the holistic part of it. And so the feature, not a bug, because we're trying to do this, what you're actually able to do is finally not perfectly define exactly what you want and get close. And this is, I think, a key thing, especially in the services industry and legal in particular. You have to get people in the loop. And the question is how far in the loop, where in the loop, and how much can you trust the system or not? And how do you adjust that based on the use case and the workflow? So, like for contracts, this feature, not a bug, non deterministic, you the law and practicing the law is not rote. You might do 70%, 80%, in some cases 98% of the same thing. But that last 2% is where you're adding the most value. Otherwise, we would have actually built software forms that can do it, like wherever it might be. And any lawyer you work with, anyone who's actually talking to other lawyers is like, hey, I found this legal form builder. It will build me this thing. And they're like, I mean, it'll work if nobody ever looks at it, right? So if it were a solvable problem with a like rote deterministic solution, then we likely would have solved it because there's so much depth in that. But the nuance and interpreting that nuance has been unattainable before. But when we have this non-deterministic thing, we can start surfacing some of that nuance. And so it's the pairing. It's for some parts, and this is I think why agentic is different than Gen AI, right? In a Gen AI space, you say, write me this contract, here are the terms. And it generates a contract for you. And then you look at it and you read it line by line. And if you talk to attorneys who have tried this, they're like, I mean, it's a good starting point, but it's actually more work than if I just wrote it myself because now I have to check everything. Whereas in like an agentic workflow, it might be here's a form builder where you give us the terms for it. And then we're going to go and make you these clauses based on those terms we're going to group into these sections. And then you're going to arrange the sections and say, but I actually want it to be, say, like above market or below market. So you're pairing these LLM enabled systems with these sort of traditional software workflows. And then as that sort of fractal pattern expands, you can do more. And suddenly it goes from being a cool demo to something that gives you more time to actually focus on the work that's valuable rather than just I got to do this and I can't get through all of it, so I'm going to crank it out. You can then spend more time thinking, which is really the value add we have.
So, to that end, that word value is something that I want to pick at a little bit as well, because one of my favorite things that you said and I thought was most interesting was talking a little bit about the use cases for agentic AI and how people would have more success finding opportunities that are fundamentally different. Not necessarily going with the easy use case, but trying to find that value somewhere else that other people aren't looking at. So I'm kind of curious your thoughts behind why that and why differentiation is such an important factor when determining AI projects.
So I think there's two different ways to think about how you use AI in a services industry. One is the one that I think we're most familiar with. It's kind of what ChatGPT is. It's the one that even Harvey or other approaches are taking, which is it's an assistant, right? It's your bespoke assistant that's tasked and trained and understands context, and you can ask it to do something and it does something. And you can ask it to do like a more ambiguous thing. And with agentic systems, it might be able to go, the quintessential example is like online shopping. Where it's like, buy my kid a birthday present. Here's a task. It can then go browse the web, find a thing. It might surface it up and then say, here are three options. Yes, buy that. And then it goes and actually like inputs the checkout information and you get a confirmation email. That's sort of a quintessential agentic workflow. The thing is that just lets you do stuff faster. And in a services environment where you're entirely based on billable hours, it gets really hard to explain, oh, yeah, like even our clients are sitting there. We know you have these tools. We know you can work faster. Why are you billing us the same amount? So you have an incentive misalignment because your incentive is to provide the best services you can, but who among us wants to pay more for the same thing? So because you have that incentive misalignment, it's about finding new opportunities that weren't possible before. And this is where I think AI tools, and particularly like AI and agentic systems, open up a lot more because what they let you do is you can look at it and say, okay, what's something I could never do before because it was cost prohibitive? Like uh, a simple example that we have experience with is like say an MDL where you have all of these records you have to look at and it's hundreds of thousands, millions of pages. What you'd likely do without any of these systems is either hire an army of associates or outsource it to somewhere else, and even then sample because you can't look at everything. With AI systems, you can. Computers scale. We just spin up new servers. If it's in a cloud environment, you can scale as much as you get. And all of a sudden, you can look at everything. And not just for one thing, you can look for 10, right? And so you suddenly have this. Another way to think about it is you can do something once. Like the organizational overhead to coordinate one person doing something is massive. So you want to get them to do that, everything you want from them at one point. With an AI system, if you've set it up right, if you've built your pipelines, if you've sent the agentic workflow and got it figured out, you could do it 6 or 7 times. And so you no longer have to do everything up front. You can actually say, oh, you want to do this? Here's what we got. Is that what you wanted? No? Okay, try it again. And so you can start doing these repeated patterns. You can start doing all of the work that you always wanted to do. And you pair that with the efficiency gains that you get from doing more work faster. So now what you see is you have more data, you have more opportunities, and you have more time to look at them and analyze them and put the strategy and insight on top of it. So when you put them all together, all of a sudden you're doing things that were unheard of before. You're, instead of just telling people on your contract analysis that, these are the things you need to watch out for, you can take it a whole nother layer and say, like, these are the things you want to watch out for. And these are the things that are actually above or below market rate because we've compared against market rate because we have the market rate data because we've done all the rest of it. Or you can say, and so all of a sudden now it's not just value add, it's we have a new revenue opportunity because it's like, oh, you want the market data? Well, that's a value add. You can subscribe to that. The other thing it dovetails into is billing models because as more and more people come through this, and I know you had mentioned this in your panel, and then I sort of countered it in mine, where like who is going to drive this shift to agentic AI and Gen AI systems? And it's been, and I agree with you, for the past few years, it's definitely been, oh well, the law firms know what they're doing, and oh well, the clients would ask if they wanted it, and it's sort of been this dance. What's been really interesting is the past 6 months or so, what we're seeing is clients are actually coming to us saying, oh no, we know you're using it. Tell us how you're using it. Not just because then we're confident that our billables will continue to make sense, but also to see what new things can you unlock for us? What new strategies can you drive? And I know at least one, for us, there was one client that we were able to work with that because of the speed we could operate using these agentic systems, we could save them millions of dollars. And it wasn't an efficiency gain, it was we could get them information faster and whole complete information faster, which looks great to the client, but is also a wonderful proof point for us that these systems really do change the way you look at it.
Of course. And I think that's particularly astute too, because probably the number one question I get these days is, okay, so what's the ROI of this AI tool? And I think if that's all you're measuring, if costs are all you're measuring, you're probably not looking at this correctly. Because to your point, there is so much more on the revenue generation, business generation, and doing your actual work better that I think some people miss sometimes. So it's really interesting to me. I think at least from my standpoint, some on the corporate side may even get it more than some on the law firm side. And that's why you're seeing more of those increased questions, because I think that realization is just starting to dawn on people these days that there is a real opportunity here.
Yeah, I think it's two-sided though. Because of hype cycles, because of everything else, people can use a chat GPT and say, oh, this is good enough. And they think it's there, but especially in a services organization where you have all of these very specific bespoke workflows or adjustments to meet the specific client needs, there's so much embedded knowledge in that and that expertise that it's in some ways we're swinging so far on the like use all the agentic system, use all the rest, drop our billings, like make all this faster. And I anticipate there's going to be, depending on the maturity of the different companies and different firms on where you are, there's going to be a little bit of a correction from that when they realize, oh, you can do parts of it, but it's so much effort to make the data clean or to move it around, or like, oh, I'm trying to build this one thing, where that human embedded expertise trying to codify that in is a lot of work. And one of the examples, I think it was from TRI's research, that was saying no one's actually figured out how to measure ROI of these agentic systems. And I think one of my favorite stats in there was the most successful pilots and POCs that anyone's doing are these specific small task focused pieces, because it's not just that that's an ROI, but then you can make the system work. Whereas if you say here's a holistic solution, it's going to take a while to ramp everyone up onto that, to shift your workflows from it, to adjust around it. And that was one of the other points that I think people were making consistently across all the panels, was that it it's not just, oh, we're here, now we have a solution. There's steps in between. And some of those steps, like you can't skip the digital transformation to go from an Excel file to a web-based service, right? Going from an Excel file to a web-based agentic solution, like you still have to get people to the web-based service part before you can even get to the agentic part. And so I think there you are seeing different sort of corporate maturity and sort of firm maturity levels coming in where they might fit somewhere or not. And that where I'm very excited to see how people find the successes. And personally within DLA, the traction we're getting, the successes that we're getting from it are good validation of this point of view.
So, to that end, you mentioned the hype cycle, and that's certainly something we saw with generative AI, where, oh, this is very cool. Oh, this can't do everything that I thought it could do. Oh, but it could still do a lot, comes back up, and now it's starting to get more enterprise adoption. As you're looking ahead toward agentic AI or maybe whatever's next down the road, do you see that same sort of hype cycle playing out, or where do you think this is going within the next year or so?
That same hype cycle is going to continue to play out, especially in the agentic AI and what's happening, just like we started this conversation. Generative AI and agentic AI are both words and terms that have sort of become generalized rather than specific meanings. And so I think it's all in this sort of, going back to my steel analogy, it's like we have steel, we have different ways of working with it. And what I think will happen is we're going to find the ways of working that work well. And so in this agentic place, I think one thing we're seeing that's actually really interesting being in this pairing of a firm and software development is there's a lot of software developers who start from here's a technology, here's a problem, let's go solve it, that we get pitches to, that we see either vendors or people looking for other input. Uh, and then there's a lot of attorneys and their support staff who are saying, hey, I want to go and like, can this do this for me? And what we see is actually the sweet spot is having the subject matter expertise to make the tools and make the software and make the workflows right. And it comes down to the smallest of details. A perfect example is one where we got a Y Combinator startup coming out who was working on deal room software for mergers and acquisitions. And they came to us and they're showing us this beautiful platform demo of you can do it. And there was someone on our team who'd been in this space asked a very specific question. What name do you use for the contracts? Because both sides have the same contract potentially, or contracts with similar vendors, but they don't have a standardized naming system. So how do you know which one's the same? How do you reference them? And getting that right is so important, and that's that subject matter expertise. So to your question on this hype cycle, I think where we are is, oh, you can not just have it draft this thing that I have to check each line, you can have it go through this whole workflow. That's really cool. And all the technologists have at this point come back to it. One of the other panelists who was with me was talking about basically an agentic workflow platform where you can make your own use cases. And what we're going to see is, I think, some blending based off of that maturity level of, do you create a platform where you have that expertise and you can get the subject matter experts to go and build it? Do you have a dedicated use case like we had also on the panel like Chorus, where it's like, we've done the work, we figured out this workflow, we have done it for you? Or are you somewhere in between where we have a firm point of view within DLA and sort of our Piper AI group of, how are we doing validated AI at scale, right? How are we taking these repeated processes where we can keep you focused on the important part? So that hype cycle will continue to play out over the next year. And I think it's going to blend based on where different organizations are as to which of those tracks they follow, whether it's sort of we tune our own, whether we buy bespoke sort of use case specific solutions, or whether we have some other hybrid in between.
But there is change on the horizon,
Yes.
is what I'm hearing, pretty much no matter where you
This
look.
is not a solved problem. This is not stable. Everyone's trying to figure it out. And what's most impressive is the speed at which the evolution is coming. Right? Where we were 6 months ago, where we were a year ago, where we will be in 6 months. It's so fast spinning that we are going to have new approaches and new solutions. And it's going to come down to, like, one of the I think Brooke, who was leading one of the other panels, called out, it's going to come down to, what data do you have, and is it in a place that we can use it, and how are you getting into this, and where do you go? Because these technologies are not magic. One thing I always love saying, I said it on stage, I think it's really important, is these large language models are static. They don't learn. The reason you have OpenAI and Anthropic and everyone spending billions of dollars is to create a bucket of numbers that is their algorithm, known as O1, known as Claude Sonnet, right? That is a static thing. It's not learning. They can retrain it by giving it explicit instructions of what this is, but they don't learn. And so there's doing all of this complex linear algebra and math to make this static set of algorithms, this static set of numbers. And then once you have that, it's like magic of, you can send it natural language in a prompt and it will respond back with natural language or whatever else it's been set up from. But because of that, that part is going to continue to incrementally improve, where you can start piecing these together, you can work with them in different ways. But that core capability, I think that is now at a maturity level where now it's like, we know how to make steel. We have steel. We might have slightly better steels, but it's steel. We know what it does. How can we now use it is the place that we're in. And I think that's, for me, very exciting.
It is for me as well. So we're getting close to the end of our time, but any final takeaways or anything you're really looking forward to that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think one thing, and going back again to some of the conversations from last week, that was really, really compelling to me, was just when I think about what it is that we are trying to do, going away from like this, we are using AI experimentation, into actual use cases requires a level of rigor that we haven't had before. It's been living in the IT department generally. And so being able to say, like, hey, this is here, but it's not that it's difficult. It just requires the patience to work through. And that is something that, just as a sort of wet blanket on the hype cycle, is one of the reasons why we do have this hype cycle, is because all of those embedded knowledge is there. How we can pull that out, how we can codify it, then lets you run faster. And so what we've created, and where I think we are, is it's more like, again, a new material, a new infrastructure. And so we have no idea everywhere it can go. And the pace is so fast that it's just, how well can you hone your strategy and focus on the things where you will find this value from that. And then as you learn it, you'll get better. So it's very exciting being in the midst of it. In some ways, it's terrifying because you think you've learned something and then the world has moved on and changed from there. But the potential on this is unreal, and There's a reason I'm in it. There's a reason you're here, and there's probably a reason that people are listening to this because there's so much cool stuff we can do. Now let's understand what value we're getting to go from that.
100%. And I'm excited to see what the terrifying but exciting future looks like for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Joe Kendall with DLA Piper. Pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the next conversations we get to have on this.
I'd like to thank Joe for joining me today, and I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And to his last point, Agentic AI is certainly something new, but that doesn't mean it has to be scary. For law firms and others in professional services that are willing to think critically about Agentic AI's value, there is real opportunity here. It's not just efficiency. It's business generation, it's supercharged outputs, and it's a potential new way of working for the professional of the future. Thank you as always for joining us for Clarity on Tech, powered by the Thomson Reuters Institute. You can follow or subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to share with your colleagues and leave a 5-star review. For more data-driven analysis of today's professional services market and in-depth conversations with industry thought leaders, please visit us online at thomsonreuters.com/institute and follow us on LinkedIn under the Thomson Reuters Institute. Clarity on Tech is a production of Thomson Reuters, copyright Thomson Reuters 2025.